Begin today the Gemara on Daf Tes Amid Beis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Yamid. Zakta Heilige Gemara Itmar. We learned the following machlokes. Shachta l'shma, if he shechts the carbon and the shechita itself is done for the right purpose of this carbon, but lizrek dama shalei l'shma. What he's thinking is that the zrike, which is an aveda later, that will be done shalei l'shma. Rabbi Yochanan says psula. This carbon will be puzzle. Reish Lakish says this kind of machshava, he's not thinking that this carbon that I'm bringing now, or this aveda that I'm doing now, should be for a different carbon. The shechita is done for the sake of this carbon. But he's thinking that on aveda later, he'll do shalei l'shma. He's thinking now that aveda later will be done shalei l'shma. That's going to be kosher. Rabbi Yochanan, so the Gemara explains the machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says it's possible because mechashvin me'aveda la'aveda. The thought that a person has in one aveda regarding what he's going to do by another aveda, that now he's thinking that the next aveda or a later aveda he's going to do shalei l'shma, it takes effect and it could passel the carbon. So if it's a carbon chatos, it'll passel the carbon completely. And the reason is, where is the source for this? Because v'alfinon mimachsheves pigul. We learn out from the din of machshave that is the psul of pigul. What's the halacha of pigul? So we're gonna learn about this in the second Perek. Pigul is when one brings a carbon, he has a machshave that he's either gonna do one of the avedas to zrika on the mizbeach shaloi bizmanoi, he's gonna spray it tomorrow, or the achila, or he's gonna eat it shaloi bizmanoi. Okay, so everything has a designated time when it has to get done. So when he thinks that the zrika is actually called achilas mizbeach, that's what the mizbeach is taking and eating from the carbon. Whether the achilas mizbeach or the achila of the person is going to be out of the time, that's the concept of the machshava of pigul. Now, how does it work by the machshava of pigul? By the machshava of pigul, the soul is only regarding the zrika, because the zrika is the achila of the mizbeach. So therefore, if the person is doing the shechita and he thinks that the shechita should be done shaloi bizmanoi, there's no such a thing. He's doing the shechita right now. How does pigul work? While he's doing the shechita, he's thinking a machshave that I'll do the zrika out of its time. And what happens? It becomes pigul. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says, just like you see by pigul, this kind of machshave will make it puzzle. So too regarding the machshave of shaloi l'shma, when he's shechting the carbon now for a different carbon. But he's not thinking about this aveda. He's thinking now that a later aveda will be done shaloi l'shma, it'll also puzzle it. However, Reish Lakish
this one does l'shma, that's something
correct.
Else.
But he's thinking now
that
he's going to do this rika later shaloi l'shma. Reish Lakish says ksheira. The carbon in such a case will be kosher because mechashvin ma'aveda la'aveda. The machshava of shaloi l'shma that we're talking about here will not take effect if I think that when I'm doing this aveda that I'll do it shaloi l'shma by a different aveda. The lo yalfino mimachshavas pigul. I cannot compare to what it is by pigul. It's a different kind of halacha. By pigul over there, it's not the same kind of psul as over here. By pigul, the person thinks that he's going to spray the blood or eat it shaloi bizmanoi. Over there, it's not a psul of shaloi l'shma. It's the fact that he's going to do it in the wrong time. The Torah gives it in a lot of time, and he thinks that I'm going to complete this carbon in the wrong time. Whether achilas adam, whether achilas mizbech. That's the concept of pigul. Here we're talking about a different Indian. Shaloi l'shma. Shaloi l'shma is only in this aveda itself. You don't compare it to pigul at all. Says the Gemara Tamayu, we see that they follow their opinions regarding another case. And that is Hashaychitis Abehema, a person that shechts an animal. And here we're talking about an animal of chulin. And he's shechting this animal for Avodah Zarah. Now whenever you shecht an animal for Avodah Zarah, what happens? Because it is Avodah Zarah, it becomes completely Aser Bahana. We learned this in Masechta Avodah Zarah. It's learned out from Gzeira Shaveh. Rashi here brings the Gzeira Shaveh, Sham from Egla Arufa, that it becomes totally Aser Bahana. Okay, so this person shechted this behemoth for Avodah Zarah. Almanas Lizrek Dam al Avodas Kechavim. Oh, but here's the thing. Actually, the case is he shechted the behemoth of Chulin, not for Avodah Zarah. Shechted it stam. But when he's shechting, he's thinking that I'm going to spray the blood for the sake of Avodah Zarah. That's his machshava at that time. Or olahakte chalbal avodas kechavim. He's thinking while he's shechting that he's going to burn the fats of it for Avodah Zarah. But he never ended up spraying the blood for Avodah Zarah. Or he never ended up being makta the chayla for Avodah Zarah. It's just a machshava that he had at the time of the shechita. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura, Rabbi Yochanan says it becomes Asur. Because, like Rabbi Yochanan said, Mechashvin, Ma'aveda La'aveda. The machshava you have during the Shechita that you're going to do the Zrika for Aveda Zarah will take effect. So even if you never ended up doing it then, it's going to become Asur. Also, we learn it out from the way it is in the Beis HaMikdash. V'yalfinan chotz mipnim. The halacha regarding the status of Aveda Zarah is learned out from the Aveda, the way it's done inside the Beis HaMikdash. Gemara in Aveda Zarah brings this, that we compare this halacha to the way it is in the Beis HaMikdash. Reish Lakish says, muteres, that if he had this machshava when he was shechting, that he's gonna spray the blood for Avodah Zarah, but he never did. And now he did the shechita stam, not for Avodah Zarah. So it's muter, because mechashvim avodah la'avodah, the machshava of one avodah by kochim does not have an effect if you're thinking now for a different avodah. V'lo yalfinu chutz mipnim. So therefore, we don't learn out from chutz the pnim to say that it should make it also for Avodah Zarah if he never ended up doing the Zrika for Avodah Zarah. So we see they're arguing the exact same thing regarding Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara explains, so yeah, some add over here the word tzrichi. We have to have Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish arguing in both of these cases, because we Yashmin and Baha, if they would only argue. Over here in the case that we're talking about regarding Kachim, I would say Baha Omer Reish Lakish. Only over here, Reish Lakish said again. Let me say that again. If we would say only Baha, this case of Avodah Zarah, that over here Reish Lakish says that it will not become Aser. I would say the reason is Baha Omer Reish Lakish. Here will not become Aser for Avodah Zarah because it's not an Avodah inside the Beis Hamikdash. Even if inside it's going to be Aser, as the Gemara goes on to say, Avo Pnim Mipnim. Maybe regarding the very fact that you learn out Shalei Lishma from Pigel, that Reish Lakish agrees to Rabbi Yochanan that you could compare them. But then to take it to the next step, to compare it also to the Avodah Zarah, even if there was nothing of what you did that was actually brought for Avodah Zarah, we just had a machshava that he's going to spray it later for Avodah Zarah, but he didn't. So then over there, I would say that it's only in that case that Reish Lakish argued. But Pnim, he does agree to Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore it has to say the machlokes in this case as well. And the same in the reverse. Via Shmina and Ha, if it would only tell us the machlokes of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan regarding Kachem, I would say Baha Ka'am Rabbi Yochanan. Only over here, Rabbi Yochanan says that I compare them, because it's all regarding Kachem itself. Avo by he, but to take it to the next step, to now compare regarding Avodah Zarah to make it Asr Bahana, even though he never ended up doing anything for Avodah Zarah, I would say, maybe there he agrees to Reish Lakish. So therefore, Tzrichi, the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish had to be said in both cases. So now the Gemara explains where is the sources of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish's opinions. So he also Avdimi, when Avdimi came, Omar he said, Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah l'siyur Rabbi Yochanan. Avdimi, so it said that Rabbi Yirmiyah asked a question on Reish Lakish, which will actually be a proof for Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Ila l'siyur Reish Lakish. And Rabbi Ila brought a proof to Reish Lakish's opinion. Rabbi Yirmiyah l'siyur Rabbi Yochanan. And what was the proof that Rabbi Yirmiyah brought for Rabbi Yochanan? And he said as follows, as a Kavachaimer from Pigel. Ma b'makoy she'im or mahareni sheichid chutz lezmanoi shuhu kosher. If in a case where if a person is shechting the carbon right now and he says, I'm shechting this carbon outside of its right time, so it's going to be kosher because he's not. He's shechting it right now in the Beis Hamikdash in the right time during the day, so it's going to be kosher. But if he shechts the carbon, and when he shechts it, he's thinking that I'm shechting this in order to then spray the blood outside its right time, what happens? That's pigel. It becomes pasul. That's the halacha of pigel, when you think that you're going to do either the zrika shalei b'zmanoi or you're going to eat it shalei b'zmanoi. So it becomes pasul. So if so, mokim, in a case, shem ama areni sheichet shalei l'shmoi pasul, if he shechts the carbon, and he says that I'm shechting this shechita now, shalei l'shmai, and that does invalidate the carbon. So shachta al manas lizrek damai shalei l'shmai. So if so, if he shechts it and he's thinking that he's going to spray the blood not for the right purpose, and it is shei possible. Definitely, it should be possible. You see, but shalei l'shma, it's more stringent. That was the question or the raya that Rabbi Yirmiyah brought for Rabbi Yochanan. But the Gemara asks, it's not a good raya. Why not? I'll answer you. You're learning out from Pigel when he has the machshava to bring it in the wrong time. Sheken kares. Pigel is kares. There's a kares in Pigel. If you eat Pigel, that is, you chayav kares immediately. So I see that this is a inyan that's extremely severe. So that's why over there, when you think of machshava in one aveda by shchita for an aveda that you're going to do later, it will have an effect. But over here regarding shaloi l'shema, it could invalidate the carbon, but there's no kaddis involved. So therefore, who says that you can apply the same here? So Elam Rav Bari Loi, so therefore Rav Bari Loi says that the raya for Rabbi Yochanan will be different. Hachi Ka'amar, this is the proof that Rabbi Yirmiyah said. If in a situation where the person is shechting the carbon, and what is his machshava? He's thinking that he's shechting it out of its right place. Shu kosher. So that's kosher because he's shechting it in the azara. So there's no psul of shaloi b'm kaimai if he has that machshava when he's shechting it inside the azara. However, when he shechts it in order to spray the blood later, he's thinking that later I'm going to spray the blood outside of the right place. What happens? Pasul. Here, the carbon becomes pasul. Now, the psul over here of chutz l'mekaimai is not the psul of pigul. Pigul is shaloi b'zmanoi when he's thinking he's going to do it in the wrong time, and that's actually kaddis. Shaloi b'mekaimai is also pasul, but not kaddis. So if so, I see if I can learn from there. So if when you're thinking shaloi l'shma, so regarding the shechita itself, it's going to pasul it. So if he shechts now, thinking that he's going to do this zrika shaloi l'shma, and it didn't shei pasul, you see it's more stringent. So definitely the psul should take effect as well. And here you can't say, oh, that's kaddis. It's not kaddis because it's not pigul. Chutz l'mekaima is a different kind of psul. It's not pigul. But on this Kavachimer as well, Maskef la Ravashi asks in this Kavachimer, but ma l'chutz l'mekaimai shekein noyeg b'chol Zevochim. This psul of shaloi b'mekaimai, that you're shechting it and thinking that you're going to spray the blood out of its right place, is a kind of machshava that passes by all karbanis. But what we're talking about here, the kavanah that you're shechting this carbon for the sake of another, there's only two karbanis that become completely invalidated by this machshava. So it's much more lenient. So who says you could apply here to say that a machshava on one aveda for what you're going to do by another aveda later will pass it? So Ravashi. So therefore Ravashi says the Kavachimer that was brought as a proof to Rabbi Yochanan is as follows. Hachi ka'amar. This is what he said. Now the Gemara brings up the case of what we learned before, shinui bailim. When you're shechting a carbon and you're having in mind that you're shechting it for someone else, not the owner of the carbon. So the halach is the carbon is kosher. Why is that? Because as we learned already before a few times, that the concept of shinui bailim is that you're thinking that you're doing the kapara for someone that's not the owner. Where's the kapara? The kapara is only by the zrika. So even if it's true that there's 4 avedas that will be possible for shinui bailim, that's the shchita, kabbalah, halacha, and zrika, but what does the machshava have to be? If when you shecht it, you're thinking that you're going to spray the blood for someone else, then it's going to pass the shchita. But if you just think that I'm doing the shchita for someone else, it doesn't pass it because the shchita is not the kapara. So it's still going to be kosher. So, however, lizrek dame l'shem pliny, if when you're shechting, you're thinking that you're going to spray the blood, which is the kapara, for someone else, pasul, only then will it be pasul. So this is the case of shinui bailim. So if so, regarding shini kodesh, which is what we're speaking about, when he's thinking for another carbon, and then if he shechts it and he's thinking that this shchita should be for a different carbon, it does become pasul, so it's more stringent. So if he's shechting now, thinking that he's going to spray the blood later for a different carbon, and it didn't shei pasul, definitely it should be pasul. That was the Kavachimer, the proof for Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that Ravashi said. We're learning the Kavachimer from Shinui Bailim to Shinui Kodesh. That's the Maskana of the Gemara, the proof for Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara, Rabbi Ila came, L'siyul Rish Lakish. He brought a proof to Rish Lakish's opinion that when you think the Machshava Shaloi L'Shma by Shchita, that you're going to do the Zrika later Shaloi L'Shma, it's not going to take effect from one Aveda to the other. What was his raya? Because now here he goes back to what we learned earlier in the Masechta, B'chlal, regarding the whole source of the 4 different Avedas, that if you shecht it, Shaloi L'Shma, it passes it, or it's not going to be good for the Bailim, for the Chayva, for the obligation that they have. So the Gemara actually brought 4 different sources for the 4 different Avedas, for Shechita, then for Kabbalah receiving the blood, and that includes also for bringing the blood to the Mizbeach, and then for the Zerika, for spraying the blood. A separate source for each one of them. So now Rabbi Ila, to bring a source to Rish Lakish, or proof to Rish Lakish, he goes back to that source. And he asks as follows: why is it necessary to bring a separate source for the psul of Shaloi L'Shma when you spray the blood? Loi, Taima Bezrike, would not be necessary for the Torah to say that by Zrika Shalei Lishma would be possible. V'teisi v'kavachayme mikavachayme v'binaya mishchita v'kabbalah. I could learn with a kavachayme from two together, from shchita when you shech the carbon, and from receiving the blood. Now the Gemara earlier in the Perek here explained you can't learn from shchita alone because shchita has a certain stringency. By carbon Pesach, there's a certain stringency about shchita that if you shech the carbon and it's not for someone that can eat it, the shchita becomes possible. That's a specific thing by shchita. On the other hand, by Kabbalah, there's also a perche that the Gemara said earlier in the Masechta. What was the perche the Gemara said? Rashi doesn't bring it over here. 1 second, maybe Rashi does bring it over here. Second. The Gemara also had a percha for Kabbalah, so you can't learn out from Kabbalah alone either. So, but from both of them together, you could learn out from the tzad hashava of both of them that it's an avodah of the carbon, and it becomes possible shalei lishma. So why don't you learn out zrika from there that it should become possible? So why did the Torah write a separate source to say that if you spray the blood on the mizbeach shalei lishma it's possible? Loimar, because it's coming to teach this chiddush of Rish Lakish. The aim machashvin ma'avoda la'avoda, that by the zrika it's only going to be possible if your machshava shalei lishma is in the zrika itself, not if you're thinking by the shchita that you're going to do later the zrika shalei lishma. That's the source from so extra pasuk to teach that Rish Lakish's halacha is right. Fragt the Gemara, Maska for Rav Papa asks on this proof of Rab Ilah. Okay, you see, you're bringing me that there's an extra pasuk regarding the spraying of the blood. How do you know it's teaching what Rish Lakish says? Maybe it teaches the opposite. V'dilme, maybe this extra pasuk is coming to say the machashve ma'avoda la'avoda. If I would only learn out from shchita and Kabbalah together, then I would say that zrika is possible if you think that machshava shalei lishma at the time of zrika. And right, maybe the extra pasuk is coming to say like Rabbi Yochanan said, that even if I thought the machshava shalei lishma by shchita for the zrika that you're going to do later, it will become possible. So the Gemara says, no, that can't be, because im kain, if that would be the din, like Rabbi Yochanan said, then l'shtek kramine. I don't need this pasuk here, and v'teisa v'kavachayim that Ravashi. I would know it already from the kavachayim that Ravashi said before, that from Shini Bailim, where it works from one Aveda to another, by Shini Kaidesh, the psul of Shalei Lishma should also work from one Aveda to another. So we had before the Kavachayim of Ravashi for this point. You don't need a pasuk for this. Say, Alamai, it must be, what's this pasuk coming to say? To exclude from that Kavachayim of Ravashi, that you should not learn that Kavachayim, and by Zrika, it'll only be possible if you have that Machshava Shalei Lishma at the time of the Zrika itself. It's an extra pasuk to teach me this. Now, what does Rabbi Yochanan answer to this? He'll tell you that Zrika, the fact that there's a pasuk by Zrika that Shalei Lishma is possible is not an extra pasuk at all, because the whole thing was here. We said you can learn it out from Shchita and Kabbalah together, but you can't because Parachachi. Rabbi Yochanan will say that to learn from both of them together, they share a stringency that you can't learn from them. The Gemara actually brought this already earlier in the Perek. So Ma'ala'anoch, because both Shchita and Kabbalah share the stringency, then that is Shekain to Unais Tzafein. They both must be done on the north of the Mizbeach, and the Yeshnan B'chatois HaPnimiyos. And it's also blood that could be brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, which is a certain stringency. And you don't have that regarding the Zrika on the Mizbeach HaChitzin. So therefore you can't learn out from there. However, the Idach, Rish Lakish will tell you, Hashte Miyeh B'Shlomim Kaiman. We are learning the source of the Kavanah Shalei Lishma that passes, or that takes away the chayva, the fulfillment of the chayva of the owner. Where do we learn it out from? From a pasuk that it says by carbon Shlomim. Shlomim, there's no din of tzafin. Shlomim is kachim kalam. It can be shechted anywhere in the Azara. And the Shlomim is not brought inside the Beis HaMikdash. So even if you're telling me that Shchita and Kabbalah is a kind of avodah that sometimes it has to be done in the north, and sometimes the blood is brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, but not in this case regarding the Shlomim. And therefore, Rish Lakish does not consider this to be a perche. So the pasuk by Zrika is extra to teach me his halacha that the kavan of Shalei Lishma must be by this avodah itself, not from one avodah to another avodah. Itmer, other Amiram also argued about this case. Shachta Shalei Lishma, Lizrik Dama Shalei Lishma. The Shchita was done for the proper kavanah of this carbon, but he's having in mind that later the Zrika will be done Shalei Lishma. Rav Nachman Amar Psula, Rav Nachman says, like Rabbi Yochanan, that it's possible, and Rabba Omar, or the other Gersa here is that it's Rava said that it's Ksheira, it is kosher. And the Gemara concludes, Rabbi retracted and he agreed to Rav Nachman that it will be possible. Why? The Zevochim de Ravashi. He came with the same svara that Ravashi said before, the Zevochim from Shinui Bailim, that becomes possible from one Aveda to another. The same applies to Shinui Kodesh, and therefore it will be possible. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek. So in the Mishnah it said that the Tanakhama says there's only two karbanos that are an exception that become possible when you have the kavanah shel lishma, the chatas and the pesach. Then the Mishnah brings Rabbi Eliezer oimer af ha'asham, a third carbon, the carbon asham as well. The kavanah shel lishma invalidates the carbon completely. So here the Gemara brings a lengthy braise that is a discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua regarding his chiddush. You learned in the braise, Rabbi Eliezer said, chatas ba'al chet. The carbon chatas is being brought for an aveda, v'asham ba'alchet, and asham is also like a potter for an aveda. So I compare them. Ma chatas shalei lishma psula. The chatas shalei lishma invalidates the carbon completely. Asham shalei lishma pasul. The asham shalei lishma also invalidates completely. Rabbi Yeshua asks in this comparison, but you can't compare. If you see this halacha that it invalidates by chatas, because there's a unique halacha by chatas, a unique stringency. Shekein dama l'mayla. The blood of the chatas has to be sprayed on the top half of the mizbeach. So Rashi brings the mizbeach had what's called a chut hasikra, a line that went through the center of the mizbeach, and most karbanis, the blood was sprayed on the bottom half. There's two exceptions. The chatas of a behema has to be sprayed, that is on top of the part of the mizbeach, and the Gemara is soon actually going to say, because it says karnais. So it has to be all the way at the top of the corners of the mizbeach. And there's another exception also, and that is oilas ha'if. There's two. There's a chatas ha'if, and there's a chatas ha'if is spread on the bottom like every other carbon. Oilas ha'if also has to be brought, the blood on the top half of the mizbeach. But here the Gemara is saying you can't learn out asham from chatas because the carbon chatas, the blood is sprayed on the top, and the asham is like all other karbanis, and the blood is sprayed on the bottom. Okay, so therefore you can't learn from there. Rabbi Eliezer says, well, if so, I can't learn from chatas. Pesach yechiach. So let's prove from the carbon pesach that's completely possible with the kavanah of shalei lishma. The same should be by an asham. Shadame lamata, the carbon pesach, the blood is put on the mizbeach on the bottom, and v'shachtas shalei lishma possible, it becomes possible, and the same should be for the asham. Rabbi Yeshua says you can't learn from the Pesach. Carbon Pesach is a carbon that has a set time when it's brought, so it has this unique stringency that's not by the Asham. Rabbi Eliezer says, well, chatas, so we'll go back to chatas. Let's learn from chatas. So Rabbi Yeshua says, well, if you're going to learn from chatas, chizrani chalila. I'm going back to my original question that I asked you before. You can't learn from chatas because over there the blood is sprayed on the top, not like the Asham, which is sprayed on the bottom. Okay, so now the Gemara will later explain why can't we learn from a tzad hashava, that there's a common denominator, that they both are karbanis that are completely invalid through the kavanah shalei lishma. The Gemara will soon explain there's no tzad hashava here. Okay, but now Rabbi Eliezer tries a third source for his opinion, that the asham with shalei lishma becomes totally possible. So Chazar Rabbi Eliezer v'dani dinacher, Rabbi Eliezer learned that from a different source in the lashon of the pasuk. He said as follows: Chatas nema ba he. By the carbon chatas, the lashon of the pasuk, it says the term he. So the actual lashon of the pasuk is that chatas hu. That's what they bring over here. Over here brings the lashon of he. Over here the lashon of the pasuk. Sheyish chatas ha'el lefnei Hashem chatas hu. B'shchita. It says that by the shchita. So that means he lishma ksheda, that if you're shechting it for what it is, then it's going to be kosher. Shaloi lishma psula. But if you shech it shaloi lishma, then it's going to be possible. Now Pesach nema by hu. By Pesach it also says the lashon of hu. V'amartem zevach pesach hu lashem. So b'zvicha, it says in the lashon of the pasuk it says zvicha, or some take out the word zvicha over here, and that's teaching hu lishmai kosher. If it's shechted for what it is, it's kosher. Shaloi lishmai, possible, totally possible. So if that's the limud by chatos and by Pesach, so Asham nema by hu. By Asham the Torah also says the word hu, because by the carbon Asham it says v'hikte reisa makayin mizbecha. You bring the pieces and you burn it on the mizbech, and it says Asham lashem Asham hu. So I say hu lishmai kasher, shalei lishmai pasul. The hu is saying if it's for lishma, it's going to be good. Otherwise, it's pasul. That's Rabbi Eliezer's new limud here. Rabbi Yeshua says to him, this is also not a good source. Chatos nema by he b'shchita. Where does it say the word he by the chatos? By the slaughtering of the carbon. That means he lishma ksheda shalei lishma psula. There you could actually say that if it's done lishma it's kosher, and if not it'll be pasul. Pesach nema by hu. Where does it say the term Pesach? Hu by the word Pesach? Bezvicha. So by the Zvicha, which also means the Shechita. Zevach Pesach, so that refers, the word Zvicha also means the Shechita. So I could say, Hu Lishmai Kasher, Shaloi Lishmai Pasal, the same limud, that if it's Shaloi Lishma, it'll be Pasal. Vol Asham, but when you come to the Asham though, Leinema Behu, Ela La'achar Haktaris Emurin. The term Asham Hu, where does it say? Later, when it speaks about burning the pieces on the Mizbeach. That can't be a source that Shaloi Lishma is possible, because V'hu Atzma Shaloi Huktarei Murav Kosher. If you don't ever end up burning the pieces on the Mizbeach, the kapara of the carbon is done already from the Zrika and it's already kosher. So how could you say that the word Hu in that context is teaching me that Shaloi Lishma will be possible regarding the 4 Avedas before the Haktara, before you burn the pieces on the Mizbeach? So Amalei Rabbi Eliezer, so Rabbi Eliezer tries again and again, all of his sources get refuted. So now Rabbi Eliezer says, his source is from a pasuk. The pasuk says, Kachatos ka'asham. We compare the chatos to the asham. Ma chatos shaloi lishmai pasol. The chatos shaloi lishma is invalid. Af asham shaloi lishmai pasol. The same is with the asham, and this is a hekesh. So on a hekesh, you can't ask any questions. The Gemara will explain later why we don't hold of this hekesh. But this was the final raya that Rabbi Eliezer brought his opinion. Okay, so the Gemara here goes through details of this brayse. Amamar. So in the beginning it said, Amalei Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Shua tells him, you're trying to learn from chatos, you can't. Has a chumrah. You're trying to learn from Pesach, it also has a chumrah. So Rabbi Yeshua says, Chayzrani Chalila. Whichever one you're trying to learn out from, I'm going back and pointing out to you the chumrah of that one. But why not? Why don't we say if so, in such a case, since they don't have the same stringency, I look at the common denominator and I can learn from there that Asham should be Pasal Shalei Lishma. Why don't we do that in this case? The answer is, there's no tzadashava here that we could learn to Asham. I could refute and say that they share the same chumrah. Both Chatas and Pesach are connected to Kodesh. Not in the same way, but they both have a tzad Kodesh. Because a Karban Chatas is brought for an Aveda that there was a Chiyav Kodesh on it, and a Pesach is one of the only mitzvahs, it and Mila actually, but one of mitzvahs say that if you don't fulfill it, b'mezit, you get Kodesh as well. And this does not apply by an Asham. So you can't learn Asham from Chatas and Pesach together. Okay, now Amalei Rabbi Shua, what did it say further in the Braise? Rabbi Shua said, Loi ima marta b'chatos. If you want to learn out from Chatos, what was the chumrah that he pointed out regarding Chatos? Shekein dama l'mayla. The blood of the Chatos is sprayed on the top of the Mizbeach, but not the Asham. So now, the question is, if he's looking to find the chumrah by chatos that's not by Asham, he could find another chumrah. And here the Gemara is going to go through a number of chumras that there are by chatos, not by an Asham. Should have told him, Lo yimamarta b'chatos. If you want to learn out from chatos, it's different. Shekei nichnas dama l'fnai v'l'fnin. Because by carbon chatos, certain carbonis chatos, what do you do with the blood? Has to be brought and sprayed on the inside mizbeach. That's a unique stringency that you don't have by Asham. So the answer is he didn't bring him that pircha because b'chatoy sachitzayni is kamrinon. Because we're speaking about the chatas that's the blood is sprayed outside. So over here, that chumrah does not apply. But again, the Gemara suggests he should have said another chumrah. She'im nichnas dama lifnim psula. There's a chumrah regarding the chatas that the blood has to be sprayed outside. That if the blood is brought inside, it becomes totally possible. Okay, so this is a unique chumrah that you find. It's learned from a pasuk. V'chol chatas sheyuva midam. Rashi brings if it's brought inside, it invalidates the whole carbon, and you don't see there's no such a din by Asham that it invalidates the carbon. So that's another pircha you could have asked, and you see this unique chumrah by a chatas. So the Gemara answers, Islay Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is Af ha'asham, that the same will apply by the asham as well, that if the blood is brought inside, it'll also become possible, because we compare it to the chatos. So this detail, the Gemara is going to bring and explain this later, and this is not the pircha. So the Gemara says he should have said another pircha. Shekei mechaperes al-chayve krisis, that carbon chatos can atone for a chi of kodesh. That's the avera it atones for. By asham, it does not atone for a chi of kodesh. Says the Gemara, no, but that's not a pircha because we're learning it out mechatos the shmiya sakel. We're learning it out from what kind of chatos? The chatos, in a case where a person said false testimony, that's not something which is a chi of kodesh. That's a chatos which is actually a oila v'yoyred. That's where we're learning it out from. So therefore, there's no question that it's an union of kodesh. Another pircha should have asked, Shekain tu'una arba matonis. The carbon chatos, the pasuk says that you have to spray the blood on all 4 corners of the mizbeach. It's not by most karbonis. It says in the Torah that you have to spray the blood saviv around, so you can put and two matonis on each side, and it splashes around. because when you put it on the corner, the blood splashes around to the, for example, to the east and to the north. So you only have to do 2 matanis, but not by a chatas. By a chatas, you have to have 4 separate matanis on each corner separately. So this is a unique chumrah by chatas. You don't have by osham or by other karbanis. And so the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, this Bryce holds like Rabbi Shmuel, the Amari holds that kol adamim turin arba matanis. All bloods, I learned that. It says saviv here and it says saviv by chatas. Around means that when you spray the blood, it has to be sprayed in such a way that the blood separates. It goes separately on the north, separately on the east, even if you're doing 2 matanes, but you have to make sure that the blood separates on all 4 sides. So you can't ask this perche. But the Gemara asks that the spraying of the blood on the mizbeach for the chatas is still not exactly the same. There still is stringency. Shkein tu'una al arba kronis has to be sprayed separately on each one of the 4 corners. By other karbanes, even if you have to make sure that it separates to all 4 sides, but you could do that by spraying twice, not by the karban chatas. You have to spray on each one of the corners separately. So the Gemara now finally says, he's asking you this question, that he could have asked a different pirche, that you can't learn out the osham from the chatos. I'll give you additional stringencies by the chatos. Only by the karban chatos does the kohen have to stick his finger into the blood and put it on the mizbeach with his finger. Another chumrah is that has to be placed all the way on the top, where there's that amma by an amma of the corner of the mizbeach that sticks out all the way on the top of the mizbeach. That's where he has to place the blood, and even more so, ika chuda has to be placed by the edge, the corner of the sharpness of the mizbeach. These are all halachas that you see. It says dafka by chatos that has to be on the keren, not by any other carbon. So why did he not ask any of these perches? So the Gemara says he could have asked it. Elachad mitrei tlas taimi nokat. He asked one pirche that the blood is put lamaila on the top and not on the bottom. That's the pirche he asked, and he could have asked other ones as well. Going back to another detail in the Braisa, Amar Amalei Rabbi Shua. So Rabbi Shua says Loi imamarto, that Rabbi Shua answers him back and he explains Bachatos. Okay, so Rabbi Shua answers him. Now the question is, Rabbi Eliezer, again, Rabbi Shua is the one that asked this pircha, right? That the chatos, the blood is sprayed above the chuta sikra, the top part of the mizbeach, not by the osham. That was his question. So now the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Eliezer, this should not be a pircha. Why? Because Rabbi Eliezer should respond and say, osham nami dami l'mayla. Even by a osham, the blood is also sprayed on the top. As the Gemara brought before, Rabbi Eliezer holds we compare the chatas to the osham regarding this as well, that the blood is sprayed on the top. So why didn't he answer this? Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, no, even though Rabbi Eliezer compares the chatas, the osham that is to the chatas, but not for this. Osham domay lamaila, to say that the carbon osham, the blood is sprayed on the top half of the mizbech le'matzis amris. That you can't say. Why not? Because kavachayim me oila. Because I have a kavachayim from the carbon oila that the blood is sprayed on the bottom. Ma oila shehi kolo, the oil that's completely burnt on the mizbeach doma lamato. The blood is sprayed on the bottom half of the mizbeach. Osham she'ena kolo, or osham that's not completely burnt on the mizbeach, like kol shekain. So it's not as severe, but I should definitely learn it out from the oila that it should be on the bottom half of the mizbeach, not like the chatas that's on the top half. Says the Gemara, but how can you learn from the oila? Ma loila shekain ena mechaperes. Oila has a leniency because it's not coming to atone for an aveda like the chatas and the osham. So maybe I should learn the osham to a chatas because it's more similar to the osham is more similar to the chatas. Why should you learn it from the oila? Says the Gemara, chatas oif techiyach, but I'll prove to you from the chatas of a bird that the blood of it is also sprayed on the bottom. I mentioned before, only the oila sa'if, that's the only other exception that the blood is on the top. But the chatas oif is on the bottom. So first the Gemara says you can't learn from this as either. Because mal chatas oif shekain eina min zebach. It's not an animal that was slaughtered. So how are you learning a osham, which is a behemoth, from a bird? Says the Gemara, oila techich. So we go back to the oila, which is a behemoth, and it's sprayed on the bottom. We had a pircha from that, so we say loidi zakari zeva, loidi zakari zeh. The chumrah of each one of them is not the same, and then I say that I learn from both of them together. Hatzad hashavish shebehen, that the common denominator here is shehein koche kochim, that they're both koche kochim, v'dama lamata, that the blood is sprayed on the bottom. So afani yavi asham shu kodesh kadoshim v'dama lamata, and therefore the asham is learned from these two together, and the blood has to be sprayed on the bottom. So you can't learn the asham from a chatos. But Rav, he asks not Rav Ashi that you can't learn from these two together. But you could ask a question, but if you're learning from these two together, what's equal by both of them is sheken elam kitzvah. These are both karbanis. There's no set amount in the value of money how much the carbon has to be bought for. However, by a asham, here there's a unique din. Sheyesh like kitzvah. There's a specific amount of money, the minimum amount of money of what it has to be at least kestev shkolim. That's what Rashi here brings. So it has to. So we'll see later in the Masechta also. So it has a set amount of money that it has to be, and therefore it has this unique chumrah. So I can learn out from the other two that we just mentioned, from the oila and the chatas ha'oiv, this leniency that it should be brought on the bottom. So maybe we go back to the fact that we learn it out from the chatas. Says the Gemara, time of the Rabbi Eliezer, the reason why Rabbi Eliezer holds you cannot learn out this detail of the Asher from the Chatas, because the Amakra, the Pasuk, when it speaks about spraying the blood of the Chatas, it says, HaKayin HaMachata Oisa, the Kayin that sprays the blood of the Chatas, and the word Oisa says, Oisa Dama Lamaila, only the Chatas, the blood is sprayed on the top part of the Mizbech, Vein Dama Shalach Lamaila. But no other carbon could you learn from Chatas that the blood would be sprayed Lamaila, so you can't learn Asher from the Chatas. If you're darshaning such a kind of drasha from the word Isa, so now you have a question on the entire opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that by a asham, Shaloi Lishma will be totally possible like a chatas. Because if so, chatas nami name, learn not from what it says by the chatas, Isa Lishma ksheira, Shaloi Lishma psula, the lashon of the pasuk where it says that v'shachat Isa li chatas, that's the source that it has to be dafka Lishma. Right, so you should say that it says Oisa, that only the chatas, if it's Zal Nishma, it's kosher, and Shalel Shma, it's possible. Ha Shar Zevochim. But then any other carbon, including an Asham, Ben Lishman, Ben Shalel Lishman Kshedim. Whether even if it's Shalel Lishma, the carbon itself should be kosher. So how would Rabbi Eliezer say that an Asham is compared to the chatas, that it's also going to be possible if it's done Shalel Lishma, if you learn out from this kind of a word, Oisa, to exclude others? And says the Gemara, Hahu Isa, Lav Dafke. This Isa regarding the Shema is Lav Dafke. You can't say that we exclude all other karbanis, that it won't be possible Shalei Lishma. Why? Because the Ashir Pesach. We see that there is something else that's left out. There's something else. By the carbon Pesach, we know, as we learned out before already, that Shalei Lishma does passel the carbon Pesach completely. So you can't dash in the word Isa over here. But if that's the case, so Hachanami over here regarding spraying the blood, so you're telling me that you learn out from the word Isa regarding spraying the blood that no other blood is sprayed on the top of the Mizbeach. So how are you learning that out? Over there it's also Lav Dafke, because the Hashir, Oilas Ha'oif, because there is one more carbon where the blood is sprayed on top of the Mizbeach, the Oilas Ha'oif. So how can you learn out from this Isa? You have to say that it's Lav Dafke, not an exclusion, because there's one more that's done on top of the Mizbeach as well. Says the Gemara, that's not a question, because bezviche mir lo'shir midi. Regarding a carbon that's shechter, a beheme, there's no other carbon that the blood is on the top, only the chatas. And therefore, the word oisa is an exclusion to exclude the asham, which is a carbon, a beheme, that it cannot be, the blood is not sprayed on the top of the mizbeach. Or another reason why Rabbi Eliezer does not hold that we compare the asham to the chatas for this detail that the blood is sprayed on the top of the mizbeach. This Braise is following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Rab Shimon. The Omar, he says, "Hai mokim luchud, v'hai mokim luchud." Even though both the chatas and the oilas ha'oif, the blood is sprayed on the top of the mizbeach, but they're not exactly in the same place. They're both on the top, but not the same. Where do we see this? The Tanya, we learned in the Braise, any of the bloods that have to be sprayed on the bottom of the mizbeach, most of the karbanis, nitonim yichuta sikra ulamato, has to be placed on the walls of the mizbeach, in the corners, below that line across the center of the mizbeach, anywhere in the bottom. And the blood that has to be sprayed on the top part, so it's michota sikra lamaila. It could be anywhere above that chota sikra. But Rabbi Eliezer Rab Shimon says there's a difference. The two types of karbanis that are sprayed on the top, they're not the same. The blood could be sprayed anywhere on top of the mizbeach. By the carbon chatas, Hi atzma einase ela al gufa shel keren. The only place that you can place the blood is all the way on the top, where there's that amma by an amma of the corner that's sticking out on the corner on the top of the mizbeach. Only there could the blood be sprayed, and over there has to be on all four corners. So therefore, regarding the carbon chatos, the exclusion of Oisa is a full-fledged exclusion because there's no other carbon where the Zrika is done like the Chatas. Even the Eilis Life is different. So you can't learn out the Ashram from there. That's why Rabbi Eliezer did not argue with this Percha of Rabbi Shua.